Time for another episode of Brio TV, the podcast. I'm your host, Bill Brio. Do we have a great episode for you right now? Well, you bet your sweet bippy. My guest today is a true legend in television and a producer, unparalleled prominence, really, in the media. The man has worked with everyone, and he tells the best stories. His book is Still Laughing, A Life in Comedy, and I'm still laughing from having just read it. My God, it's a great book and so many great stories. Please welcome Mr. George Schlatter. George, wonderful to meet you.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here. Glad you liked the book.
Oh, my goodness. It was hilarious. And, often people will claim that they have a list of who's names of Hollywood. Your book truly does. It's just incredible, the people that you've worked directly with, the careers that you've influenced. So congratulations on a very inspiring career.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I had a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Now,
fun.
I bet you did. I am 66 years old. I was about 11 or so when Laugh-In started, and in the early days of 1968. And that was such a groundbreaking experience. And it was a show that I watched with my mom and dad. The whole family would watch Laugh-In, and it just blew everybody's mind. It was so different.
The interesting thing about that is that an 11-year-old saw a different show than a 40-year-old saw. You saw bright colors and people going through walls and getting hit with water. You saw a different show than the people who were 40 years old saw. They saw a political, satirical attack on society. So it was, you saw a different show than older people saw. It was the same tape, but different.
That's true. But, you had Arte Johnson saying very interesting and Lily Tomlin on the phone. And these characters were so vivid that it worked if you were 12 or 40 or 60 or any age, right?
Yes. Well, interesting enough, the reason those characters were available because there was no place in television for young character people. And so they came on and we rounded them all up and put them in a studio. And then we just started taping bits and pieces and sight gags and whatever and put them all together with the new editing techniques we had then, which was a woman by the name of Carolyn Raskin. Put all of those little bits and pieces together and then put it out there and said it was Laugh-In. And the network said, what is this? This is not a television show. I said, right. And they said, well, we don't understand it. I said, well, your kids understand it, so deal with it.
Well, it must have been baffling to NBC executives at the time, but boy,
was it ever. They went nuts. They said, we can't air this.
It just worked. I remember having Laugh-In bubblegum cards, and you could literally punch through and open the doors for the Laugh-In joke wall on these cards. That's how everybody got it, right?
Well, the joke wall actually was a piece of material that the art director brought in for script book covers. And I said, why don't we take that to have the panels open up? And so we built that wall with the panels opening up. And then we took panels out on location so we could have that joke wall anywhere we wanted to tape. And it added to the tumult. It added to the curiosity of what was going on behind that wall.
Yeah, it sure did. And in reading your book, what's fascinating is your early days and just everything that sort of brought you to the point of Laugh-In, this understanding of burlesque that you had from a very direct level that you kind of, I would never have thought of Laugh-In as burlesque, but actually it makes so much sense having read your book.
So comics came on in burlesque. And they just came out and did something funny. They didn't have to do it for so long, and there was no question about the material. We got by with a lot of stuff with Laugh-In because the network had never seen anything like it. And while a bunch of executives were in one corner saying we couldn't do what we'd just done, we were in other corner doing what was next. So it was an adventure. It was not a television show. It was an adventure.
Well, let's talk about one specific adventure right in the pilot. One thing that hadn't been done before was a nipple of all things on television, right?
Yeah. Well, that was it. While we were taping all of the field bits, we did out in location, right? They were at the other end of the field doing blackouts, and so Judy Carn, who was an outrageous young woman, and it was difficult to keep her clothes on, and so they took a shot of her nipple and just put a flash cut on the air. So when I saw it, I said, "Hey guys, what is this?" They said, "What?" I said, "Look, you can't put that on." So we started painting petals on it, and they more and more till finally the shot of Judy's nipple was maybe 2 seconds, and the network looked at it and said, "What is it?" I said, "I don't know." And they didn't know what it was until you could stop frame video. And they said, "That's a nipple." I said, "You're putting me on. That's a nipple." Anyhow, it went on the air, and it remained one of the most famous shots that we could not air.
Well, you were just trying to keep abreast of the comedy times.
You said a mouthful.
Okay, I want to talk a bit about your roots. Take you back to your early days in near Buffalo in East Aurora. This is very close to where I am in Toronto, and I have friends who live down there. But I understand you lived in a very interesting place. Is it the
Roycroft Inn?
Yeah,
Albert Hubbard. It was Albert Hubbard, and we lived at the Roycroft Inn.
What was it like to be a young lad growing up in that famous place? It was a design center, right?
I didn't know it was famous when I was there, I thought it was only famous because I was there, right? but Roycroft Inn was a very famous place, and my mother was a concert violinist, and I grew up around classical music, and the Roycroft Inn was our home. And then we had a farm out on Oleander Road, too.
Wow. Did you ever, as a youngster, travel north of the border to Ontario or Canada?
No, I stayed pretty much in East Aurora. We didn't have a lot of money to do much traveling then,
Yeah. It's interesting how things come full circle because in later years, you've been very generous with donations to the National Comedy Museum in just south of there, right?
Yes. Well, a wonderful lady, Journey, called me and said, could she get a couple of clips from Laughing? And I said, yes. So I sent him. And she said, this is good. Do you have anything else? I said, lady, I have a warehouse full of else. What do you mean? So I started sending her clips of the shows we'd done. And you can't believe how many shows I had done. And I started sending her clips from these shows. She said, this is wonderful. And the more she got, the more I sent. And eventually I became very involved in what I thought was a very useful, necessary contribution to our society, the ability to make people laugh. So I sent her a ton of stuff. And eventually I also sent her a few dollars, right? And so eventually I sent them enough material and enough money that they named the theater the George Schlatter and Jolene Brand Schlatter Theater. And I'm really proud of it because it's the only place in the world devoted entirely to tributing the people who made us laugh, which I think is a necessary part of our environment.
Yeah, what a wonderful idea. And this is, of course, the National Comedy Center in Lucille Ball's hometown of Jamestown, New York.
Yes.
And people have to get there. There's archives of all kinds of great. I know Carl Reiner donated his notes there as well, and many other comedy legends, right?
Oh, sure. Well, Joan Rivers just gave them a whole warehouse full of material. She had hours and hours and hours of material. See, when a little baby's born, they laugh. We don't know why they laugh. We don't know what they're laughing at. We find out later they were laughing at us. Well, to celebrate that action of laughing is a worthwhile part of our environment. And that's what the whole Comedy Center is devoted entirely to tributing those people who made us laugh. There's museums for writers, directors, producers, musicians. But this is the first place in the world devoted entirely to people who made us laugh. And that's why I'm deeply involved in that center.
Well, it's wonderful, and it's a great idea, and people should go. I want to just talk a bit about your definition of being a producer. I know at one point in the book you suggest that what's a producer do? Well, a producer he lays out a vision for the show, bring together talent, fight the budget battles, say no without getting too many people mad at you at the same time, tell little lies to keep the whole project going and keep the suits away from the stars. That's got to be the best definition of a producer I've ever heard.
It sounds a lot like you read the book.
I love the book.
That. Yeah. It's all of that and more. You also don't need a lot of sleep. You also can survive the slings and arrows of outrageous enemies, because for every joke, there's somebody who say, you can't say that. Well, go ahead and say it. And that's what we did. We made a whole museum out of many of the things in there. When we did it, you couldn't say it. But we need to laugh. We must laugh. And that's why I love Lucy.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, when you were a young man, you had some great adventures growing up. And you became involved with a talent agency. I think you were still in your teens.
Yes.
And that was MCA, I think, wasn't it?
Yes. And it was Music Corporation.
And was that where you met Frank Sinatra?
It was in that same era at one point, and there was no vehicle for tributing the musical artists and so forth. So we wanted to do a thing with Frank Sinatra. And Mo Austin said he could get him to come out and just walk around and introduce some of the people. And the way I got him, we put the studio right next to his office, so he could walk out of his office and introduce these different people. And I became very friendly with him. He looked at me once and he said, I have ties older than this guy. But if I could make Frank laugh, I could get by with anything. And the secret of my long and suspicious career with Mr. Sinatra was the ability to make him laugh. He was dangerous. You got to be sure he's going to laugh. But if you could make him laugh, it was the most wonderful feeling in the world.
Well, you must have had a great gift for that. I know from talking to other people, I used to work at TV Guide Canada, and a friend of mine was a photographer down in L.A., Gene Trindle.
Yeah.
You remember Gene? Yeah.
Yes.
Gene used to shoot. I think he shot more TV Guide covers than anyone, but he had an opportunity to shoot Frank, and I remember he was told he had 3 shots and then get out of my way. You know, Frank didn't suffer fools, right? So
no, he did not.
But where did you have this gift to be, able to be kind of funny with folks who are pretty intimidating?
Fear.
Really?
The whole thing was fear. And with Sinatra, you could make him laugh. I remember one time they sold a commercial. Frank did not do commercials, but they sold a commercial where he was getting a lot of money to do a commercial for All Nippon Airways, which was a Japanese company. And so they said they wanted me to do the commercial. I said, guys, no way I'm going to do a commercial with Frank Sinatra. That's a death wish. So anyhow, eventually they were going to pay me quite a bit of money, and they were paying Frank $1 million to do this commercial. So I looked at what they planned, and it was going to be 4 days to shoot this commercial. And I looked at what they laid out, and I said, guys, I think you're talking about 45 minutes. Well, you saw these Japanese people who couldn't speak English suddenly acquired the language. They said, 40 minutes? Are you crazy? I'll lay the commercial out. I'll shoot it all with a stand-in. And when I get it it's perfect, the way you want it, then I'll have Frank do that. So all these little Japanese people, so yeah, I talked Frank into it. He said, all right, so he got into his tuxedo and he came out. He says, can I leave now? I said, Frank, no, we haven't even started yet. So I had 45 minutes with him. So I had it so he could do a commercial, then walk over to another set and do a still, then another bit of the commercial. We walked around the studio to where when I finally got to the end of it, it was like 40 minutes, and he'd done all the bits and pieces in his commercial. And at which point he said, that's it, I'm through. I said, Frank, I need this other shot. He said, you called me crazy. This is crazy. You're not going to get it. I said, Frank, I have to have this shot. He said, you're not going to get it. I said, I was desperate. What are you going to do? So I said, Frank, don't make me hurt you. and he looked at me like, what? You'd hurt me? I said, if I don't get the shot, I'm going to hurt you. Oh, he said, well, let's get this shot. I don't want him to hurt me, right? Then he did the shot, and when he got all through, it went for actually 40 minutes, and the commercial won awards and everything else. So then they said they want to do another one. So by now, I'm getting a number 2, a big fee too. So I talked to him. He said, okay, but this time I don't want to have to hang around. So anyhow, my relationship with Frank was largely based upon being as outrageous as he was and making him laugh. If you made him laugh, you got by with murder.
That's amazing. But it must have helped that you were a fairly imposing fellow yourself, and you are. I mean, that you played football, you were wrestling and fighting at circuses. You had this reputation of being pretty rough and tumble, I think, and you need to have that, I think, in order to make those jokes work, right?
Yeah, fear helps comedy, you know? And it was a long and a very bumpy career because I had a lot of success, but I also had some monumental failures. And but they became funny too.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about one of those TV failures in a moment, but I wanted to just stick with your early days for a minute here. Another career you had, you became very entrenched in Las Vegas, very involved with some of the early people who were running Vegas.
Careful. Be careful.
I'm choosing my words very carefully.
Please choose them carefully. I did know some colorful people, yes.
Yes, so you worked with some colorful people there in Las Vegas, but you also found them to be a very rewarding experience, right?
Yeah, again, if you could make them laugh. But at this point, there were like 6 hotels in Vegas, each run by people from different cities. And those people were quite colorful. Mm. And when you saw Greenfeld Jungle, it looked like it was all one guy. It was not. It was all in those individuals. Each of them were a wealth of colorful anecdotes. And I got to know them because I was very young, and I made them laugh. And so I got by with a lot of stuff up there. And I did. I worked in Vegas booking the hotels, and I got to know everybody. But that was an adventure, too, which we've left out of my book. We mentioned it casually, but Elaine said she didn't want to read about those colorful people, you know.
Right. Well, pardon me, one of those adventures and part of your success, I think your connections in Vegas put you in touch with so many performers that later on as a producer, you had these connections, right?
Yes.
And then one of the acts, so this great story in your book about Ronald Reagan.
Oh, boy.
Working with monkeys, and I'm not talking about the monkeys of television singing monkeys. This is real chimpanzees, real gorillas, right?
Lou Wasserman was head of MCA, which is a talent agency. And I was this young guy, and he called me up and he said, I want Ronald Reagan to play Vegas. I said, Mr. Wasserman, he doesn't do anything. He said, that's not my problem. I want him to work Vegas. So now I go to Ronald Reagan, who he was as stiff as a president, but before he was president, he was just an actor. So I go to Ronald Reagan. He did nothing. So I booked him with this one act. And part of the act was he had these 5 chimpanzees called the Marquand family. There were 5 gorillas, and it was a great act. But in their contract, they had to do 30 minutes. So Ronald Reagan put together the rest of this act, and it ran too long. So they said, you got to cut some time. He said, I can't cut my act. So they said, well, then take some time out of the chimps. And the chimpanzee says, look, hello, mate. In the contract, it says 30 minutes, not 29, not 31. It's 30 minutes. That's all they can do. So I had them do for the first 10 minutes of the act in the hall and then open the door so they'd go out and do the last 20 minutes, which was okay until the night when they came to me and said, hold the show. Well, these gorillas were already doing the act in the hall. So when he opened the door and let them out, and they all came out on the stage, and it was pandemonium. They were in the lights. One of them drank a bottle of tequila. It was absolute pandemonium with these gorillas loose in the saloon. And so it was funny. So they said, tell them to just do that. So the solution was that Ronald Reagan had to cut some time out of his act, which he never forgave me. He never forgave me for booking him in to the Frontier Hotel doing an act with a bunch of gorillas. But Nancy Reagan and I wound up friends, but Ronald Reagan never forgave me for the monkeys. But it was a hell of an act, I'll tell you.
Well,
he wound up really working with monkeys. He became president.
That's right. Exactly. You did him a favor. You got him ready.
Yes.
George Schlatter will be right back to Sock It to You again after these messages.
You make me feel so young. You make me feel there are songs to be sung, bells to be rung, and a wonderful fling to be...
What's new this month on Super Channel? Well, for one thing, there's the new 6-episode Canada-Ireland original crime thriller, Clean Sweep. The series stars Charlene McKenna from Peaky Blinders and Barry Ward from Anne Boleyn. They play an Irish husband and wife She's a supermom looking after 3 kids. He's a Galway detective. As he puts it, we make a good team. You're holding down the home front, me catching the bad guys. Trouble is, she hides a dark secret, and when a cold case is reopened, well, trouble strikes a little too close to home. Clean Sweep runs 1 episode a week, all month long on Super Channel Fuse, and can be streamed on demand each week following the broadcast. On the lighter side, Super Channel has new Season 10 episodes of When Calls the Heart running this month on Heart and Home. And remember, Super Channel, an all-Canadian service, is available via most cable providers across the country, as well as streaming live and on demand with Amazon Prime Video channels and Apple TV+. What's happening this month on North America's fastest rising streaming service, Paramount Plus? Well, set phasers for stun as Paramount Plus heads boldly into a 4th season of Star Trek Lower Decks. New animated episodes are airing every Thursday. Launching September 8th, there's also a global event, a Star Trek Day special. Jerry O'Connell, the voice of Lower Decks Commander Jack Ransom, celebrates 50 years of Star Trek animation. Remember that Saturday morning cartoon series from the 70s featuring William Shatner and the original cast all reassembled and reanimated? As Spock would say, fascinating. And check out the Canadian-made movie, The End of Sex, a Paramount Plus exclusive starring Emily Hampshire and Jonas Chernick as a married couple who try to rekindle their relationship. As Picard would say, engage. And remember, with a mountain of entertainment to choose from, there is something for everyone on Paramount Plus. Here he is again, George Schlatter. Now let's switch over to your early days in television. You became the producer of the Diana Shore Chevy Show. And really, you didn't really have experience as a producer, but you sold yourself on the spot as a producer, right?
So Dinah was wonderful, by the way. I loved her. Dinah Shore, she was wonderful. She was a songbird and she sang, but she also was a very bawdy lady. She also had a wonderful sense of humor, and I could make her laugh. So after everybody else had been hired, they brought me in to produce the show because I could make Dinah laugh. And that was the secret. And she was a wonderful producer. I had such fun with her. We did outrageous things. But I became producer because I could make Dinah Shore laugh. And eventually then, when the Dinah Shore show went off, then I wanted to do the Judy Garland show.
Right.
Judy Garland was famous for being in trouble. And I wanted it, but I'd never met her. So I wanted to be signed for the show before I met Judy. So when I met Judy, I didn't know what to say. It was all of a sudden. So I said, Judy, I don't care what you may have heard about me. There's no truth to the rumor that I'm difficult. She said, you're difficult? I said, see there, even you've heard it. So she said, you're difficult? I said, okay, close enough. So she said, let's go have some. So we went out and had a bottle of Liebfraumilch. And from there on, I could make Judy laugh. And the secret of breaking that coil that wound up, was to make her laugh. And I got by with a lot of stuff with Judy, making her laugh.
Well, there's a subhead to one of your chapters, The Time Judy Garland Tried to Kill Me. And, one of the many colorful and funny subheads, but I know you were able to make her laugh, but not all the time, right?
Well, no, it was a dangerous way. It was a little bit like with Frank, The secret was everybody was so in awe of these people that they were afraid of them. And if you walked in and you could make them laugh, got by with murder. I worked with Frank and I worked with Judy. And Judy went out and you had to break that coil. And they made a commitment for Judy to appear in front of 1,100 CBS affiliates. And they said, what is she going to? She said, yeah, what am I going to do? I'm afraid. I said, you go out, and we put her at the edge of the stage, and she sang, call me irresponsible, call me unreliable, call me undependable too. Have my silly alibis bored you. I won't take a powder I can't afford to. And the place went crazy. And when she heard that laugh, it broke that coil, and she began to do anything I wanted her to do. But she was an adventure, Judy Garland.
Oh, I bet. There's great stories in your book.
Little woman. She was a tiny little woman, but this dynamo in there that worked on when she got ready to go on stage. She just didn't enter. She exploded on stage. And it was really an adventure. I loved her.
You write so many great stories about her, but you were very smart how you tailored just the environment for her for this series to please her. You actually painted a yellow brick road from her trailer, which you had brought onto the lot of CBS Television City to the set, and put pictures up, and she was just thrilled that you did that, right?
Her trailer was like a playpen. It had all her memorabilia in it and whatever. So she came out of the trailer into a candy striped makeup room, and then that had a yellow brick road going onto the studio. So she liked that very much. It was down the yellow brick road, and but again, it was always an adventure. The trailer had all of her memorabilia in it, and so one time she got very upset on stage, and when she got upset, it was a dynamo. It was an explosive. It was a terrifying experience. And I don't know why I did it, but when she got upset, I started singing Over the Rainbow. Stupid thing to do, perhaps, but it was desperate. So I started singing Over the Rainbow, and she got really angry. She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, if you're going to produce, I thought I'd sing."
Wow.
So she stormed off, went into the trailer, and I thought maybe I'd gone a little too far. And so I followed her into the trailer, not knowing what to do. So I got up on this coffee table and I held a match under the sprinklers. And I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "If you don't apologize to me, I'm going to drown you." Wow. Now, you understand, I was in my 20s, right? And I knew I'd be fired, but I was taking a chance. She said, "Apologize. You made a fool out of me." I said, "Apologize." She said, all right, damn it, I'm sorry. So I get down off the table, and she now is chasing me down the yellow brick road, because that was pretty funny. Here I am with the desperate wanting to do this show, and I'm managed to get myself fired. And so I thought it was funny. So I just sat down on the stage and started laughing. And she laughed too. So the whole thing lasted maybe 2 minutes. And from there on, it was a question of keeping Judy a bit off guard and making her laugh. What an adventure I had with her. What a marvelous, dynamic, talented, disturbed pile of talent that was. But that was one of my adventures.
You in the book, you even mentioned how, you must pinch yourself at these, the people that you met and the relationships that you had, right?
Yes. Pinch or kick. Yes.
You mentioned that she was pretty competitive as well, even when she had her daughter Liza on. Though they had a sort of when they were singing together, Judy really gave it her all, right?
Take no prisoners. When Judy went out on stage, whether it was with Liza, she and Lena had the same kind of a relationship, and Ella. We did one whole show with Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, who worked together when they were children, and the studio had them doing 3 movies at one time. So they didn't give them time. They had no time for naps. They had no time to put them in bed early, so they'd be up early the next day to work. And so these 2 children were major, major superstars. Yeah. So we put him on the first show, and they relived the moments from their childhood, which was pretty exciting. Nothing like it today.
You mentioned in the book, these were child stars who grew up at MGM, and you had a colorful way of spelling MGM, right?
Yes. But see, the thing was, the secret of my limited, suspicious career is panicking, and panic made a large part of my life, right? But when I panicked, all I could do was do something funny, and with MGM, that's what happened, and it worked frequently. Sometimes it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And those were even fun. When it didn't work, that was funny too,
I know that these specials that you produced for her, there was a series, but you made each of them, you treat it as a special, and they're wonderful shows if people ever get a chance to look at them today. But at some point, CBS they kept trying to force you to make this the girl next door, Judy Garland.
That's right.
And you very smartly knew that was not appropriate.
That's right. I said she's not the girl next door. That's right.
And I wanted to get to there's 2 Canadians I want to talk to you about. One of them is Norman Jewison, because he was brought in by CBS to replace you because they wanted him to make her the girl next door.
That's right.
What happened then?
And Norman looked at the 6 shows I'd done, And he said, wait, this is terrific. That's exactly what I would do. So I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, this woman is special. She's not Dinah Shore. She is not. She is Judy Garland. And but he loved the show. So, but I got fired. One of the many times when I've gotten fired, of which I'm very proud. Because the 6 shows that I did, they never aired them until later in the season because they were indeed specials. Judy and Lena and Judy and Ella and Judy and Mickey. But see, the suits are the enemy, because they are wanting to protect their own career, their own jobs. And so if you bend or break that mold of success that has creeped into the executive floor, you're in danger. They're in danger. So they often resent it. And so that's why I got fired. I was fired quite often, by the way. But when Norman Jewison came in and looked at the 6 shows we'd done, he said, "This is perfect. That's exactly what I would do." Anyhow.
Well, you gave him quite a break because that show helped him become a big director, right?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. He was a talented fellow. But see, we avoid taking chances because you're in danger. But danger is a great motivating part of your life, Yeah. So when you the motivational element and introduce it, first of all, your veins collapse and you start to panic and you do things you might never do if you were not in danger. So danger played a large part in my career, in my limited successes.
Well, I want to ask, George, do you think that most people maybe get in their own way when it comes to having success? You were the one to take the risks and not let danger or fear put a stop to things, right? And that's
fear can be an inhibiting element. It can also be an inspirational element. I mean, people under fear, their veins collapse and their eyes get big. And when you're afraid, you do strange things. You develop strengths and power that you never knew you had. And so I lived a lot of my life in fear, and overcoming that fear generated a lot of creativity. It did with Laugh-In, and it did with Judy Garland. I mean, Laugh-In, they had nothing to put on at 9:00 Monday night. It was a disaster time period, and fear. So we came up with something that they could put on.
Well, it certainly was a spectacular success. One other thing, just note on fear, you were for a one time a bouncer, although you have a whole other term for bouncer, right?
Well, see, bouncer, they put that in the paper. I married Jolene. Jolene said she would not marry me because the people I was hanging out with, I'd be dead before I was 30. Because I did know when I was at Ciro's in the Frontier in Vegas, I did know some very, very colorful people.
Right.
And I did have a job where, and so I said I released a story that I was not a bouncer. I was an executive in charge of emergency departures. And she still sounds a lot like a bouncer, right? I did handle some things, but that was part of my job when I was at Ciro's, handling any kind of disturbance. And
amazing. Yeah.
It all came into this whole checkerboard, fragmented barrage of accidents and pleasures and fun and laughs. Laughter is the biggest panacea. If you can laugh, when something hurts so bad, the ultimate pain, you laugh. It can't hurt anymore. You say, I don't believe it. Well, if you can rely on that, you can get through anything. And I did.
Good for you. You mentioned your wife, Jolene, and in the book, you pay tribute. She's a very significant part of your life. You guys have been married, I understand, for over 65 years.
65 years, and she wouldn't marry me, but eventually I convinced her to. Actually, what happened is Jolene was at Ciro's when I was there, and so all the guys and all the young stars wanted to meet Jolene.
Yeah.
So I said, well, okay, but be careful, talk to her, but don't fool around because she's going with a really ugly guy. And if you get too close, you can get hurt. So they all talked to her. So Jolene said, I don't understand it. All these guys talk to me, but nobody ever asked me out. I said, well, I'll ask you out. So I asked her out. And when we announced that we were getting married, these guys all said, you were the ugly guy. I said, right. And so brilliant. We got married, and Jolene was a brilliant comedian. She was a hell of a dancer, and she was at Ciro's, and then people saw her, and they came in, and Howard Hughes and everybody came, who is this beautiful young woman? And so I started talking to her. Herman Hover wanted to manage her, I said, Herman, you run a saloon. You're not a manager. But the idea of negotiating a contract with this beautiful young woman appealed to me greatly. So eventually, when we announced that we were going to get married, all these guys came to me and said, you were the ugly guy. I said, right. I was and,
well done.
Got married 65 years ago, so I did a pretty good sales job.
Fantastic. She worked with Ernie Kovacs, I think, right?
This girl in the Ernie Kovacs. Ernie adored her because JoAnne could stay there all night and she never knew what she was going to do. But she would show up, and Ernie would have her in this shot of her in the bathtub with a periscope coming up through the tub, and the shot of her she did crazy things with Ernie. I loved Ernie. And she loved Ernie, and so we had a lot of fun with Ernie Kovacs.
So you met Ernie Kovacs yourself then?
Oh yeah, and I was doing a show with Edie Adams at NBC, and JoAnne was taping the Ernie Kovacs show at ABC, and so I got to go over there after we finished with Edie and watch Ernie. And it was my big thing with Ernie was that I said, Ernie, you don't have a punchline. It's funny and it's wild and it's zany and crazy, but you need a punchline. He said, no, I don't. Ernie, you're so close. All you need is just a punchline. So he called up one night about 11 o'clock. He said, I want you to come to the studio. I said, Ernie, I'm taping. I can't. He said, come over right now. So I go over to the studio, and Ernie's there with a raised stage with a car on the stage. And he said, look at this fine automobile, hit the fender, and the car went through the stage, crashed. He said, no, that's a punchline. I said, yes, sir, Mr. Kovacs, that is a punchline, all right. So my obsession with punchlines dotted my relationship with Mr. Kovacs.
That's funny. That's amazing. When we come back, more from Laugh-In legendary producer George Schlatter.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high.
Well, we're here again talking with Emily Gagne from Hollywood Suite. Emily, it's September. This is the time of year, all the sports, there's hockey starting, baseball's on, football, and I understand Hollywood Suite is weighing in.
Oh yeah, we're kicking off the school season with sports on film. You know, movies like Slapshot, which is a new personal favorite. I know that sounds insane, but I just watched it for the first time. It still holds up. It's great. Field of Dreams, everyone's favorite. We've got the original Space Jam. Oh, and we have the premiere of 42 with the late, great Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah, no kidding. You know what? Don't tell anyone. I have never seen Slapshot.
What, Bill? That seems like your favorite movie.
I know. So now I have a chance to get caught up thanks to Hollywood Suite. So thank you for programming it. What else you got coming up in September?
We also have what we call September soundtracks. So if you're not into sports, we've got some great musicals and music movies. You know, everything from Purple Rain to Scott Pilgrim versus the World is on our service this month. And the last thing I wanted to mention, which is in neither collections, but it's a big deal to me, and it might be to you, listeners. We have Ishtar coming to the service. One of the worst movies ever, some say, and one of the best movies ever, others say, including my mom. So Ishtar is coming to Hollywood Suite September 9th. Tune in. Elaine May's famously disastrous comedy.
Well, there you have it. Emily's mom's favorite film, Ishtar, this month on Hollywood Suite. Thanks a lot, Emily.
Thanks, Bill.
Well, you've loved her on Mary Makes It Easy. Now she's cooking up a whole new series called The Good Stuff with Mary Berg. What's it all about, Mary?
It's called The Good Stuff with Mary Berg, and when we were talking about it and kind of developing the idea and working through what it was actually going to look like, the main thing we kept coming back to is just filling people's lives up, and that doesn't mean with like always big flashy things, but just sharing stories from people doing good things from across Canada, sharing stories from people who are maybe more well-known who are doing good things. There will obviously still be food. Every day I'm gonna cook something up that you can make at home, have cook-alongs with different chefs, hopefully get some guests to cook along, because I want to convince people that anybody can actually cook. Wow. But I'm really excited to learn. I'm a lifelong trier, and I am so looking forward to learning from the different experts we're going to have on.
That's The Good Stuff with Mary Berg, weekdays at 10 a.m. on CTV. And we're back with the amazing George Schlatter. So let's talk a bit about Laugh-In, of course. You met this producer, Digby Wolfe, right? A writer-producer from England.
Yes.
And teamed up on this idea. And you'd already been thinking about this, though, for several years.
Digby Wolfe was a producer. He was an outrageous young man.
Yeah.
And he did a show in Australia, and he was thrown out of Australia. They came to him in the middle of the night. He'd taken on the government. They said, you're going to have to get out of town, not out of town, out of the country. So they sent him out of the country, and I met Digby, and he was wonderful because he was totally irreverent. He had a vocabulary like a whole dictionary full of words that I didn't understand. But he was brilliant, and he was an outrageous sense of humor. So when I teamed up with Digby, he brought into my world a whole thing about contemporary issues and personalities. And we had a ball. God, it was fun. And we got by with anything, because it was so fast that while they were figuring out this joke, we were into another joke. And we got by with it. And that was all Digby.
People can still watch Laugh-In. I know in Canada, it's on Tubi, but it's several places still, right?
Yes. And so, something, it's now 50 years later, and there are still jokes in Laugh-In that people say, well, I don't know whether or not we ought to say that, Proud of that.
Does it shock you that it's been 50 years since Laugh-In went off the air?
Yes, because it was tough to get it on the air, and it was even tougher to keep it on the air. And today it would be even more difficult to put it back on the air because we've developed a whole new collection of fears and hesitation. You can't say this and you can't say that. Laugh-In, we would say it and then apologize later. Today, it would be very difficult to do that show because there's so much contemporary. We attack politicians, we attack the establishment and commercials and everything. And it would be very difficult to do Laugh-In today the way we did it then. That's why today when you watch television at night, you see it's all dark colors. We used all bright colors and windows opening and things happening. And it was a happy environment of joy and outrageous people. I mean, Goldie Hawn came in, and I thought she was adorable. So her first day, we gave her an introduction, and she screwed it up so bad. And she said, well, I'll do it again. And I said, no, that's gold. So we never let her learn anything. From then on, anytime Goldie had an introduction, we would do anything to disrupt her, to interrupt her, right? And it became her earmark. Goldie was one of the brightest women in the world, but we featured our ability to make her laugh, and that laugh was gold.
You even went so far as to turn her cue cards upside down, right?
Yes. And Ruth Buzzi would stand next to the camera, make rude noises. Goldie couldn't contain herself, right? And so when Goldie laughed, the whole world melted. And then another woman walked in, Lily Tomlin.
Yeah.
And she came into my office, sat down, and all of these people came out of her, right? And so we started dressing them up. And the first thing we did with her was late at 11 o'clock at night, and she did this telephone operator. And, Ernestine, Mr. Red. And so she called important people and said outrageous things to William Buckley, right? Mr. Buckley. They said, why do you say that? I don't know. It's William Buckley. So she sat there and she called William Buckley. But people never know to this day, this may be the first time people find out about it. I said, Lily, hold it. When you dial the phone, dial with the middle finger.
Right.
Because they won't understand what it is, but we'll know you're kind of giving the finger to the establishment. So when you see her in the stage, she dials with the middle finger. But Lily came in and would walk into the studio and became all of these people. It was no longer Lily Tomlin. It was Ernestine, or it was Mrs. Earbor or something. So a lot of luck was involved and just taking chances. Lily was a delight. Cher was a delight. Goldie was a delight. Judy Carnes. Anyhow, there's an awful lot of luck and an awful lot of turning success into failure, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Lily Tomlin and writes the foreword to your book, Still Laughing, and Goldie Hawn writes the afterwards. So they're both very much involved with this book, which is a wonderful, wonderful read.
Cher was in there too. I had great fun with Cher, and all of those women, they women were thought of to be funny. It was Gracie Allen and those women like that. But these were gorgeous women, and they became different characters. And we had a lot of luck with Judy Carn and Goldie and Lily Tomlin and, you know.
And cast. Do you? I follow Ruth Buzzi. She's on Twitter, and she has a joke of the day, and they're very funny. Do you still keep track with Ruth?
Well, Ruth Buzzi came in, and she sat down in the Xerox room on a little electric piano and played her own composition of "Don't Futz Around." I said, "Oh, this is a lock, right? I mean, we got a job." She said, "Well, you want me to do Don't Futz Around?" I said, "No, you want." So Ruth Buzzi became all of these different people, and outrageous, talented, gifted young woman. And she did an act with Dom DeLuise, and it was, you just saw in her all of these people emerging. And what Laugh-In did, it was a playpen for retarded adults. And we could take anything that happened and say, wait a minute, hold it, we'll do that. And we would go out on stage. We would tape sometimes to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And if we got an idea, we would stay there and tape it. We've removed accident from television. Everything is so careful now, improved with sponsors and censors and the network. Well, at that point, we didn't get anything approved. We just taped it. And then while they were telling us we couldn't air that, we were airing something else that they said we couldn't air. Nobody's taking chances anymore. Everything is dark and angry. The music is angry and the colors are dark. And I need to see something bright and colorful and happy and playful and outrageous. And I miss that.
Especially, Mr. Schlatter, when you consider 1968 was such a very dark year. Even myself, not being, I was just 12 or so, to 11, but I was very, there was assassinations, there was terrible things happening in Vietnam and all over the place. Those bright colors really were such a ray of hope for a lot of young people who watch television.
Yes, I wish we would see it today. But we need some rebels. What happens is the bad children are put at the back, right? I spent more time in the principal's office than any kid in school. I was always in trouble, and the principal would say, "Not you again," right? And but the rebels are not bad children. They are children. They're creative children of the rebels.
Yeah, no kidding.
I miss that today. I don't see bright colors.
No, it's a great observation. Just speaking of politicians, you helped elect one.
Yes, I had to live with that. Yes, I did. Yes.
So we're talking about Richard Nixon, who was talked into saying "sock it to me" on Laugh-In. Yes. But you had to sort of coach him through that, right? Well,
no, what happened, Paul Keyes was his closest friend, and Paul Keyes was the writer on Laugh-In. And I said, I need to do something for the first show next year that's different and explosive. He said, well, I can get Nixon. I said, get him for me, too. I wasn't crazy about him even before he was president.
Get him for me, too.
Oh, we got him. And he said, sock it to me. No, Mr. Nixon, can you just smile? Yeah, this comedy is new to me. Sock it to me. Yes, Mr. We took that down the hall, put it in the next show, put it on the next night, and it exploded. Everybody said, the president of the United States is doing sock it to me on Laugh-In. And that exploded, and that helped launch the series. And helped to get him elected, and I've had to live with that. He wasn't a bad guy. Yes, he was. I'm sorry.
You tried to get the candidate for the Democrats to appear as well.
We chased him all over the country trying to get him to say what a good idea, and he didn't do it. He said that maybe cost him cost him the election, not answering Richard Nixon.
Sure, we did.
See, the sense of outrage, the sense of playful, they consider outrageous to do dirty words. No. If you use a dirty word, put it in the middle of the sentence. Don't make it the punchline. What we did, we were careful about the language. It was the subject matter that often got us in trouble. And I miss today seeing the rebels. We need an arena for rebels. And it's not just enough to be offensive with language, with the subject matter. You've got to take something that's a totally irreverent approach to a reverent society and bending it and doing interviews with William Buckley, right? And Gore Vidal. And I miss that sense of fun, that sense of playful. They consider outrageous if it's offensive material. No, we did offensive subject matter, but we did it fun. We did it funny.
Yeah, you sure did.
That's the secret.
One other Canadian that you gave a career start to was Lorne Michaels. I mean, my goodness, you hired him as a writer, right?
Yes, he came in. He was in Canada, and he and Hart Pomerantz came down from Canada and went right from the airport to Dan and Dick's dressing room. And Lorne sat with Ron and Martin, and he sat in the dressing room, and he was not a great joke writer, by the way, but he's a great organizer. The man's on the air for 43 years. How can you question that kind of success?
Yeah.
But he's a great organizer, but he's not a terribly funny writer.
Yeah. Well, he's done all right.
All right. 43 years. He owns Canada, for God's sake. I wish him well. You know, he's done very, very well, Lorne.
He sure has. Some of the other guest stars on Laugh-In, Peter Sellers was always hilarious. That scene with him and Arte Johnson as the Germans going up and down. You had a role to play in that skit, I believe, right?
Yes. Well, Peter Sellers, I wanted Peter Sellers to do the show. And he said, okay, he would do the show, but he only wanted to work with Arte Johnson and Ruth Buzzi and Judy Carn. So I said, sure. Yeah. So we went to tape him, and then he was with Arte Johnson. He says, that's not Judy Carn. I said, no, it's a disguise. So anyway, we got Peter Sellers to do outrageous things, and he had more fun with Arte Johnson because Arte Johnson immediately became different characters, and that really appealed to Peter Sellers. But getting Peter Sellers was a major acquisition because he came all the way from England. And
no kidding.
That embassy sketch. So you did a lot of research, didn't you, young fella?
Well, listen, I loved your book. It was a pleasure to read, and others should read it. And it's fantastic. All these great stars. And one of them, another one was Sammy Davis Jr., who is someone you knew very well and made a big impact when he was an early guest star on Laugh-In, right?
Well, Sammy and I grew up when Sammy was the Will Maston Trio. First of all, it was the Will Maston Trio, then the Will Maston Trio with Sammy Davis, then the Will Maston Trio starring Sammy Davis. He was this enormously talented young man, and he became different people, and he did, for everything from tap dancing to impressions. And so I had quite a relationship with Sammy. And then he came on in the middle of the night, and there was a black comic, right? Morgan, my wife, and he did the judge, right? And so when he came on and did Here Come the Judge, order in the courtroom, all y'all, judge gonna go do some time tonight. When Sammy came on as Here Come the Judge, a black man doing a white judge in a white wig was an outrageous concept back then. But everybody loved Sammy doing Here Come the Judge. We had a lot of fun with Sammy.
Yeah, no kidding.
Early.
You once bought a house for him, right?
Well, Sammy was he was a black man in a white world. And he wanted to buy this house that used to belong to Judy Garland up above Ciro's. So I went up there and I was making $200 a week. And I bought the house for Sammy. It's outrageous to believe that a guy my age could buy that expensive a house. So I bought the house, and then Sammy moved into it. And then he started throwing parties all the night up there. And all the audience from Ciro's would go up to Sammy's house and say, Sammy, stop it. You're taking a whole audience away. And but he had party. Sammy was a party looking for a place to happen. What a talented young man he was.
No kidding. The two guys we haven't talked about on Laugh-In are Rowan and Martin. And in reading your book, and I had forgotten this, but they really did not get along that well. Is that true?
Well, no, but they'd done this nightclub act. It was one of the funniest nightclubs, which by the way, they kind of borrowed from another act. But they were not close friends. Dan was a great straight man, and Dick was silly. And we would put Dick out there, and he would talk for 10 minutes, right? And we would take that 10 minutes and edit it down to 2. And that was very, very funny. So accident. See, I got to tell you, accident played a large part in my career. It played a large part in my success. And Rowan and Martin, Timex wanted to have a host for this crazy concept I had to do just jokes. And so they wanted to have a host. Well, I didn't want a host. So we took this team. Dan and Dick came out in tuxedos and presented this thing as if they were straight, and then introduced all of these crazy people and crazy concepts. And a woman by the name of Carolyn Raskin developed crazy editing techniques, flash cuts. And we went to one point, we said, don't go away. We'll be right back. And went to black and came back and said, see, we told you we'd be right back. The network said, you crazy. You just told them to tune out. I said, no, I told them to come back. That's the kind of fight that we had that would go on endlessly in the hallway.
Terrible.
But Rowan and Martin were great for that show. They were straight. They were older than the rest of the cast. And they went along with it, and they were great. They were fun, but then they were not. They did not get along with each other very well.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Alan Seuss, he seemed to be ahead of his time, right?
Alan Seuss, he was probably the first kind of openly gay character on television. They had and he was not gay. He was just flamboyant,
right?
And we would send. He was my threat because whenever I'd come in and I'd been there all night editing or something, and I'd come in and pushing to hurry up, come on, let's get together, everybody behave. And he'd say, "Well, we're not regular, are we?" And he'd do these flamboyant things, put me down, and the rest of the cast would laugh hysterically because Alan Seuss would attack me. He was flamboyant, and he was a very talented fella. But I miss him. He added a great deal to the cast because he was totally outside of the realm of acceptability and irreverence and impudent, and he was a major contributor to the success of Laughing, Alan Seuss.
Yeah, I always thought so too. You've been very generous with your time. I just want to touch on a couple of things. Of course, you also went on to produce Real People,
Yes.
which was a very, very popular show. Sarah Purcell, and it was really led to a lot of what we watch on television today.
Yes.
Just talk a bit about your involvement with Real People.
Well, again, if you can find a disaster and walk into the middle of it with the solution, then you can achieve, you can buy a house in Beverly Hills. NBC had nothing to put on, and they called me and they said they just shot a thing on the streets of New York using the new cameras, ENG cameras. Herb Schlosser said, we just shot this thing on the streets of New York and the new ENG electronic cameras, and we just went out and talked to people on the street. Can you do anything like that, just with real people? So I said, well, I'll call you back. And I went skiing with Stein Erikson, which was right away a dangerous thing for me to do because I was in an accident coming down the hill. And so I said, yes. I said, we'll do the ENG cameras and we'll call it Real People. And he said, well, let's do a pilot. I said, I can't do a pilot. I said, in order to try this out, I'm going to have to do at least 6 shows. That in itself was an outrageous position with the head of a network. He said, 6 shows? I said, the only way to do this and prove it. So he said, okay, it's impossible today. You have to have a meeting with 10 people telling you when to have a meeting with the people who can buy it. So we went on and we did these shows and we came on with it and nobody could understand. We were celebrating unbelievable, unknown, unusual people. And the fact that we were presenting a show involving people just like the viewer that were eccentric or strange or whatever. And it happened. It happened about 3 shows in and went, wait a minute, this is funny. And it was heroic. We did celebrated each week. We did Heroes. And now it's become a major part of CNN. But at that point, we did obscure Heroes, Carl Benavides, first black astronaut, all of that stuff was on Real People. And it was unacceptable at that point because they were not celebrities. They were just interesting, fascinating, real people. And with Sarah Purcell talking to them, it was a major discovery. Sarah Purcell was the first major woman star in NBC News. And she became the highest paid woman on television.
Wow.
I wasn't paying her. The network, the keeper, paid a lot of money. I wasn't going to, are you kidding? But Sarah Purcell made a major contribution to that show. But it was going out on the street with a camera and finding interesting people and then presenting them and having an audience there to celebrate these unusual, bizarre, eccentric individuals. Yeah. And now CBS, CNN does those heroes. Well, we did a hero every week. Yeah. And I'm glad to see that they're spending some time celebrating those people who have achieved success that we should pay some attention to.
Yeah, no, I think you even did the Tuskegee Airmen all kinds of heroes, right?
Tuskegee Airmen. We did the Tuskegee Airmen. We did the Navajo Code Talkers. The men who they were using the Second World War. They used to send out. They were the code used in the Second World War, and they were the language used in the South Pacific was with the Navajo Code Talkers. They went into the villages and took the Navajo language and used that as the code. So that was the communication during the Second World War with the Navajos. And when it was all over, they had to promise never to announce what they'd done because they wanted to keep the code. So these men lived in secrecy for many years until we came along and did a tribute to the Navajo Code Talkers.
Just a little note on that. That actually happened in Canada as well. The Canadian, they used a Cree language to be a part of a code. Because the
Navajo Code Talkers broke the mold. They were using this obscure language, as you did in Canada, and they couldn't break that code. And that's what helped win the Second World War.
Yeah,
and then
fantastic.
We took Tuskegee Airmen. We took black people could not be in the Air Force, so we took an entire division of the Air Force, and we gave them, and we told the Germans that told the Germans they were night fighters, and they saw these black pilots, and they thought they were some kind of superhuman being, and we told them they were night fighters, and they were afraid of them.
Yeah. No, you did.
My career, when you read the book, it sounds like I'm a crazy person. I'm not a crazy person. I'm a strange person. I'll agree with that. but much of my success came from breaking rules, from having a good time, and from wanting to laugh and demanding the ability and the right to laugh. And I haven't exhibited that so far in our interview, but when you hang up, I'll think of something.
Listen, you don't come off as a crazy person at all. It's a very heroic book and read, and your work in terms of even civil rights we haven't really touched on is so impressive, and all the credit to you. I did want to talk about one disaster, though.
Just one?
Turn on. Just the one, yeah. Turn on. Like
I was more proud of Turn On than anything I did.
That's what I understand. Yeah.
Yes. NBC needed something to put on. Again, born out of necessity. We needed something. And so I told them this show that was going to be using the new electronic devices, woman by the name of Carolyn Raskin. Again, we went in and edited videotape in a way that was unheard of. And we put the show on. When NBC saw what was supposed to be a pilot of 13 shows, they said, we'll do 18. They were so impressed with these flash cuts and an irreverent approach to everything. And there was a guy in wherever it was back east that wanted to keep Peyton Place on the air. And when he saw Turn On, he called all of the stations. So as the show came across the country, he was calling stations saying, this is replacing a show that I love. So the stations had never seen Turn On, but were canceling it as it came across the country. By the time it got to California, it had been canceled. But it still remains today one of the best things I ever did. It was a good venture.
And George, I think you write in the book that the tape doesn't exist, but I understand that there is some.
I don't believe the finished tape exists. I believe that there's examples of some of it, but they locked it up because they made me promise never to show it because they thought when the audience saw it, they'd say, what was wrong with this show? I believe there's a sample of some of it, but I don't think they ever did air the complete show.
There's actually 2 shows on.
There's 2 shows that are out there, but I don't believe they are the finished show. I believe they were the shows that we were still working on.
All right.
Turn On. I'm more proud of Turn On than almost anything I ever did because it was truly an adventure and it was a disaster that I managed to survive. And,
all right.
I'm very, very proud of that, along with a number of the other times I got fired.
Well, you've been so generous with your time. I'm going to wrap up. One question I have that's important, though, and this is really a tremendous story. What is the secret to having a beautiful 65 years of love? Your story of you and your wife, Jolene.
Well, I tell the story when some wives tell their husbands to jump, right? And they don't. I say, "How high, baby?" And I found a gorgeous, talented, bright, funny woman who would put up with my antics, and I'm more in love with her today than when we got in. I was able to convince her to marry me. I don't know how I did it, because she wasn't going to marry me. She said, no, you're going to. People I was hanging out with, she said, you'll be dead before you're 30. Well, I'm not. And but I was lucky enough to find and con this gorgeous, talented young woman into marrying me and give me two terrific children. My daughter, AJ, is teaching children to ride, winning championships, and my other daughter, Maria, won Emmys for the
producing. Yeah,
Christmas show she did with Anyhow, she's a very talented woman with Dolly Parton, and she's doing a show now, working on a show. So I have two talented daughters and a talented wife, and I'm still fooling them. I'm still getting by with murder.
All right, I'm just writing down. The answer is How High Baby. I'm just this is going to come up here with Sandra, so I want to make sure I get that right.
When your wife says jump, you don't say no, you say how high, baby.
Okay.
65 years it's worked for me.
That seems to be a good idea. I always ask at the end of these just quick questions. What did you have a favorite TV show when you were growing up? Was it now?
Favorite TV show, yeah. Well,
when you were a youngster, or was it a radio show? I mean, what was the favorite?
Sure. All of those, Loyal Amos and Andy. I loved Amos and Andy.
Yeah,
and I loved. I listened to radio was wonderful because you made up your own images. But favorite show, I can't put my finger on my favorite shows were all shows that I produced. It'd be difficult for me to come up with a show that was a favorite that somebody else produced.
Okay,
Kovacs was as close as I got.
Fair enough. Is there something that you're watching today that you just love? Is there a new show, a streaming show that you and your wife love?
Well, I watch a lot of news because it's better than working out. It's better than doing exercises.
It's true, though. It's a good point. It's kind of hard to parody the actual news today, isn't it?
The best thing I can do is to not get into politics because
all right, fair enough.
My political views can get both of us canceled.
Let's move on. So here's the last question. Do you have a favorite all-time TV theme song?
Theme song? Probably it would be Cher when I talked her into singing Call Me Irresponsible.
Okay.
There was this gorgeous woman doing her first show away from Sonny, and she said, I'm not going to do that. I said, come on, just you come out and you sing, Call Me Irresponsible, call me under, have my Phyllis Alibi's boy. And so I had her do that, and then we dropped the lights, and she came walking out and was wearing nothing but a raisin in her navel and came out and started doing outrageous. Very talented lady, and funny and bright, So I love Cher, but I've had great luck and great fun with the women in my life, starting with Jolene. How High Baby.
There you go. Listen, for people listening, the book is called Still Laughing by George Schlatter. It's available everywhere. It's the best fun time you can have with a book. We haven't even touched on stories about Tim Conway or Richard Pryor or Robin Williams. There's many famous people that you've been associated with, and each story is funnier than the last.
One thing you ought to leave them with, when everything else fails, right? When you have no other answer, laugh at it.
Okay, well, that's a great place to leave it. Mr. Schlatter, thank you so much. And it's astounding to me. I don't know if you want to mention your age, but you are so full of energy. You're an inspiration. Congratulations. You're doing something very right.
No, I do no drugs. I don't even do vodka anymore, which I miss. But I used to do an occasional sip of vodka in dusk. I don't even do that anymore. I'm so clean, so pure that it makes me sick. I was a lot more fun. You should have done this interview 15, 20 years ago. I was even more fun then.
Well, I'm thrilled that we did it today. Thank you very, very much.
You're dangerously bright, so I got to be careful what I say to you. You're a good guy, and I enjoyed the interview. Well,
my God, I'm going to keep that one in my memory book. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. This was fun.
George Schlatter's pick as his all-time favorite TV theme song, well, he called an audible on me. It's not really a theme song at all. It's Cher singing Call Me Irresponsible. I doubt she ever recorded it, so here's a sample of George's pal Frank Sinatra singing it his way. As her TV special producer, Schlatter talked Cher into singing the ballad even though she thought it was a corny idea. Audiences Seeing her on TV for the first time since her split from husband and partner Sonny Bono ate it up. Sonny and Cher appeared years earlier on Laugh-In, and Schlatter really helped them both make the transition from singers to comedy variety TV show performers.
Call me irresponsible. Call me unreliable. Throw in undependable too.
If I could turn back time.
Thanks as always to producer Phil Hong for running everything through his amazing audio blender. My thanks as well to the many publicists who arrange for the guests to appear each week on these podcast episodes. Big thanks to our sponsors, Hollywood Suite, Paramount Plus, CTV, and Super Channel. Are you enjoying our funky new theme song and incidental music? Hats off to my second favorite band, the Crispy Critters, especially BJ Del Conte and Paul Boudre, for the music they recorded years ago for a little film I made with Pat Bullock called Varsity Blues. And yes, that is Steve Dudley on piano. Finally, thank you, listener. If you enjoy this episode, please favor us with a like or a review, or nominate us for a Fickled Finger of Fate award. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.